Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. Hello YouTube fam, prepare yourself for an in-depth exploration of the dark side, as today we're unlocking Darth Vader's deepest and darkest secrets. Set aside all your previous notions of this infamous space dad. We're taking away his mask, leaving behind the red saber, and following Skywalker's complete story from his early days on the burning sands of Tatooine to his scorching end on the Death Star. We discuss Anakin's innocent childhood years, his forbidden love with Padme, Chancellor Palpatine's talks of everlasting life, and the devastating moment that turned the Chosen One into the most feared villain across the galaxy, far, far away. We'll dissect his epic lightsaber clashes, uncover Vader's hidden motivations, and maybe even shed a tear for the conflicted soul trapped beneath that mechanical monstrosity. And who knows, we might even discover if redemption truly is possible for a Sith Lord with an equally powerful son. So press the play button, grab some popcorn, and come with us to explore the dark side. Let's jump into the story of Darth Vader in a way that has never been explored before. And trust us, it's full of surprising twists you'll not want to miss. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Slave? I'm a person and my name is Anakin.
Childhood story of Anakin Skywalker. So imagine this: Tatooine, the twin suns baking the sand like an over-enthusiastic pizza oven. That's where little Annie, a kid with more midichlorians than you can imagine, spent his early days. Born to a slave mom named Shmi, they bounced around until they ended up owned by Watto, this grumpy Toydarian with a penchant for junk. Surprisingly enough, Anakin was tight with his fellow slaves, sharing stories and dreams under the twin suns. And speaking of dreams, Annie had a real need for speed. He eventually built his own pod racer, a rickety little thing, but it was his baby. Now, Annie wasn't your average kid. He had a knack for flying anything with an engine, even if it was just that rickety pod racer. Little Annie wasn't just a slave kid. He was a tinkerer extraordinaire. Before he could even blow out 9 candles on his cake, he'd whipped up his own droid, C-3PO, from spare parts scavenged at the Mos Espa Bazaar. Talk about handy. He built his droid to keep Shmi company in that scorching wasteland. One day, a sandstorm rolled in like a disaster waiting to happen. Shmi begged Annie to save himself, but this kid wouldn't have it. He loved his mum like crazy, and there was no way he'd leave her to brave the wind and sand alone. So he faced the blizzard, promising her they'd be okay. Talk about a brave little kid, right? Well, that's just the beginning of Annie's wild ride on Tatooine. One day, Watto, the grumpy Toydarian who owned Annie and Shmi, sent him on a scrap run. Now, Annie had a knack for finding treasure in junk, and this time he stumbled upon the Motherlode, an ultra power cell, just the juice his pod needed to fly like a jet. But then, bam! A swoop gang hit Mos Espa. Lights went out, and the medical center's generator took a blaster bolt to the gut. Annie rushed over, saw the busted generator, and boom! He remembered the power cell. He could have used it to win the next pod race, but no. The medical center needed it more. So, Annie had a choice: pod racer glory or saving lives. Guess what? He chose lives, and that's the kind of kid Annie was. Now, Tatooine is a dry place. Drier than a desert, probably, which is why Annie never saw a single drop of rain on that sandball in his whole life. Talk about bad luck. But hey, even without rain, Annie found ways to make his own sunshine. He had his droid, his friends, and a heart bigger than the entire planet. And who knows, maybe all that tinkering and pod racing on Tatooine was just the training he needed for the wild ride that was about to come his way. Under those twin suns of Tatooine, when the sand got crunchy and Watto's insults hit sharper than ever, Shmi had a secret weapon: the story of the Sun Dragon. This wasn't your average bedtime story, folks. This was a fire-breathing tale of a beast who lived inside stars, tougher than any other being and with a heart bigger than the planet itself. It guarded its loved ones like a mama protecting her cubs, fiery wings blazing even the hottest inferno. Now, generations told this story on Tatooine, each adding their own spice. But Shmi's telling, that was pure love. To her, Annie wasn't just a slave kid. He was the Sun Dragon himself. The strongest heart in the galaxy was beating under his dusty Tatooine skin. It was a celebration on good days, a reminder of Annie's inner fire. On bad days, it was a lesson in courage, a whisper that even when Watto acted like the devil in his bad moods, Annie's heart would guide him towards what was right. This wasn't just a story, folks. It was a secret language between Shmi and Annie, a bond forged to secrecy. He kept it close, a precious ember in the harsh desert of his life. And who knows, maybe that Sun Dragon spirit, that fierce love and unwavering hope, was just the thing Annie needed to weather the storms that were brewing on the horizon. We then fast forward to a 9-year-old Annie, grease-stained and tinkering with a droid, when a grumpy Watto bellowed for him to come inside. There, amidst a gaggle of dusty strangers, Annie's eyes landed on a vision. A girl with hair like spun gold and eyes sparkling like Tatooine stars, straight out of the spacer tales he'd overheard about angels from all those mysterious travelers. Little did Annie know this angel was actually Padme Amidala, Queen of Naboo in disguise, visiting his dusty sandball of a home. Watto instructed Annie to man the shop while he led a tall Jedi-looking dude named Qui-Gon Jinn into the junkyard, but Annie couldn't focus on rusty droids. His mind was stuck on the beautiful girl. Smitten, there was a single question that was buzzing in his head. Was she an angel? Now, this wasn't just any innocent crush. This was the spark that ignited a fire that would blaze across the galaxy, changing Annie's life forever. From that day on, Tatooine wouldn't just be about scorching sand and Watto's grumbles. It'd be the birthplace of a love story that would fuel a rebellion, a prophecy, and the rise of a legend, even if that legend would eventually turn into the galaxy's biggest baddie, Darth Vader. 9-year-old Annie, still buzzing from meeting this angel, got stuck cleaning up a Jar Jar Binks-sized mess. Talk about going from starstruck to sand-covered in seconds. But hey, at least Watto let him head home after the chaos. On his way, Annie stumbled upon Jar Jar getting roughed up by a grumpy racer. Not cool at all. Annie stepped in, broke up the fight, and guess who showed up just then? The whole Padme entourage. Now, Annie's jaw hit the floor when he saw the fancy dude with Padme, Qui-Gon Jinn, rocking a glowing laser sword strapped to his hip. He was a Jedi. Annie's mind was blown. Knowing a sandstorm was brewing, Annie invited the whole crew to crash at his place. Shmi, his wonderful mum, welcomed them with open arms. Back in his room, Annie proudly showed Padme his masterpiece, C-3PO, the droid he built himself. Padme was impressed, no doubt picturing all the adventures they could have with a Golden Protocol droid by their side. And he also spilt the beans about his pod racer project, a junkyard masterpiece. The group huddled around a makeshift Tatooine dinner as the sandstorm raged outside. Annie, feeling braver now that he was home, asked Qui-Gon Jinn all about his lightsaber, Jedi secrets. Sign Annie up. But when Qui-Gon said he wasn't there to free slaves, Annie's little world got rocked. He couldn't believe it, not when his mum always said everyone deserved a helping hand. Then the conversation took a turn. It turned out that Padme's royal starship needed some serious repairs, and the prize money from the Boonta Eve Classic would come in handy. Annie, ever the problem solver, had a crazy idea. He'd race his pod racer and win the cash for them. Shmi was hesitant, worried about her son risking his neck in a high-speed desert chase. But Annie reminded her of her own words, that we all have to help each other out sometimes. And with that, Annie sealed the deal. He was racing for freedom, for friendship, and maybe even a little bit for Padme's dazzling smile. The next day, Annie woke up with sand in his hair and a Tatooine sunrise painting his room. He, Jinn, and the rest of the crew headed to Watto's junkyard, where Annie nervously pitched Jinn's crazy plan, race his pod racer for their freedom ticket. To everyone's surprise, Watto, that grumpy hut with a heart as cold as ice, eventually agreed. With hope in his heart, Annie was sent off to fix up his pod racer. Now, Annie's friends weren't exactly betting on him winning the Boonta Eve Classic. No worries though, because Annie was too busy tinkering and dreaming of zooming past the finish line. He even snagged a power pack from Watto's shop to get the pod up and running. When the engines roared to life, the whole group cheered, their faces painted with hope and a little bit of desert dust. Later that day, while Annie was being his usual 9-year-old self and getting cuts on his arms from all of his shenanigans, Jinn snuck in and played doctor, collecting a sample of his blood. Before Annie could even ask what that was for, his mom called him inside for bedtime. Little did Annie know, Jinn had sent a tiny drop of his blood to this Jedi dude named Kenobi, who nearly choked in surprise when he saw the results. Turns out, Annie had more of those midi-chlorians than even Yoda, the ancient green guy everyone whispered about. Talk about a surprise, right? This wasn't just a slave kid with a pod racer anymore. This was a force to be reckoned with, a galaxy-changing secret hiding under Tatooine's dusty sky. As the Boonta Eve Classic was about to blast off, Padme, ever the pragmatist, was doubtful of the young racer. Turns out, Annie had never actually finished a race, which was why Padme wasn't sure this 9-year-old with a junkyard racer stood a chance against the galaxy's best. Annie, though, well, he had fire in his eyes and sand in his hair, ready to prove everyone wrong. Fast forward to the arena, a buzzing hive of engines and nervous anticipation. Shmi, his mum, pulled Annie aside, her voice laced with worry, and asked him to be safe. Jinn helped him into the cockpit, the boy's hands itching for the controls. The starting light went green, a beacon of hope in the dusty air. Annie slammed his foot down, but the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. Annie, in his metal bird with clipped wings, was stuck, watching the other racers zoom into the sunset. He flipped switches and adjusted dials, his fingers a blur of adrenaline and determination. And then, like a sandstorm rising, the engines roared to life. Annie blasted out of the arena like a fiery comet chasing after the pack. The crowd erupted. Cheers echoed through the canyon as the race officially began. Annie was behind, sure, but he was flying, and that was all that mattered. He had the Force, his mom's love, and a dream bigger than the Tatooine sky. Annie tore through the pack at light speed. 2 racers were left behind before they even knew what hit them. He dove over a messer, then bam! The lead tried to knock him off course, sending him careening towards a service ramp. Annie, cool as a a cucumber, boosted that rickety pod up the ramp like a rocket, caught some serious air, and managed to pull out of the nosedive without ending up a grease stain on the desert floor. Talk about skills. He held the lead tight until they hit these tight, twisty archways. Suddenly, Annie's left engine started coughing up smoke, but Annie, he wasn't the type to throw in the towel. He tinkered, he twisted, he coaxed that engine back to life, and whoosh, he was back in the game, passing pod racers left and right like they were parked Tatooine snails. The finish line was in sight, the crowd was roaring, and Annie had fire in his veins and sand in his teeth. Annie was tearing through the final stretch, victory in his sights. But then, boom! His steering rod snapped, shaking his pod racer uncontrollably. Annie wasn't fazed though. He's a Skywalker, remember. He gripped the controls, white-knuckled and determined, and somehow steered that rickety hunk of metal toward the finish line. He crossed it in a shower of sparks and sand, a victor against all odds. The crowd went wild. Annie's pod got swarmed. Jin hoisted him on his shoulders in celebration. Back in the hangar, Annie reunited with his family and friends, the warmth of their joy erasing the desert dust from his heart. Pockets stuffed with prize money and heart bursting with joy, the kid raced back to Shmi. He threw those credits at her feet like they were the galaxy's biggest prize, eyes sparkling brighter than stars. But then things got awkward. Padme and Shmi, bless their hearts, smothered him in hugs and kisses, turning Annie's cheeks red. But the joy wasn't over yet. Jin threw another curveball. He wanted Annie to become a Jedi. Annie's head exploded with excitement, visions of lightsaber battles and force-powered castle buildings dancing in his eyes. But then reality slammed him. Shmi wasn't coming. His mum, the Sun Dragon Whisperer, insisted he grab this chance for a better life, even if it meant leaving her behind. Annie's world crumbled. He packed, said goodbye to his trusty droid, C-3PO, promised to come back and free Shmi, and then it was time to go. Tears blurred his vision as he hugged his mum one last time. The taste of salt and sand painted a bitter farewell. They raced towards the ship, hearts heavy with goodbyes and a sudden chill in the air. Suddenly, bam! A dark figure zoomed by on a speeder, all dark robes and Sith vibes. Darth Maul himself, ready to rumble. He leapt at Jin, lightsabers ignited like twin suns, and Annie's world exploded again. Jin yelled at him to get on the ship and blast off to safety. Annie scrambled aboard, heart pounding. He spilt the beans about Maul, and with a roar of engines, they hurtled back toward the fight. Jin got hurt, but they managed to escape Tatooine, leaving the sand and suns behind. As they soared into the galaxy, Annie caught his breath. Jin was still healing, but he managed to introduce Annie to Kenobi, another Jedi friend, excited and maybe a little scared. But one thing was for sure, his life just took a hyperspace jump into the unknown, and Annie Skywalker, the boy from Tatooine, was about to become something much, much bigger. Tatooine's heat clung to Annie like a sand-caked cloak, making sleep on the chilly spaceship a struggle. He tossed and turned, the silence broken only by the hum of the engines. Padme, ever the kind soul, noticed his restlessness and draped her blanket over him. Annie, touched, reached into his pocket and pulled out a secret treasure, a Japer ivory pendant he'd carved for her, a reminder of him. Padme held it close, promising to wear it as a memory, a talisman of luck and goodbyes. She saw it as more than just a trinket, a symbol of a boy she was leaving behind, of a bittersweet friendship forged in the Tatooine desert. As they zoomed towards Coruscant, a city planet so dazzling it made Tatooine look like a sand pile, Annie pressed his nose against the cockpit window. Towers scraped the sky. This wasn't anything like Tatooine. This was a whole new galaxy, and Annie was about to jump in headfirst. The landing was a whirlwind. Chancellor Valorum himself greeted them, followed by that Naboo Senator Palpatine. Padme and her handmaidens disappeared with Palpatine, leaving Annie feeling adrift in a sea of hallways and officials. He wandered back to Padme's chambers, hoping to see her one last time, but no luck. The Queen, all business now, promised to pass on his message when Padme was free. Annie left, a lump in his throat and a hole in his heart, the echoes of his Tatooine life fading. He was about to become a Jedi, but a part of him would always be back there, with his mom and with Padme. Deep down, the galaxy was calling, but Annie knew that these goodbyes would forever sting like sand in his eyes. But amidst the fancy lights and important folks, Annie had a secret storm brewing inside. Turns out, Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi dude, believed Annie was the chosen one, the galaxy's big hope for balance and all that. He even shared his theory with the Jedi Council, those wise old dudes who decided who got to be a Jedi and who didn't. So Annie found himself facing these 12 masters, full of robes and wisdom, as they tested his skills. Images flashed on a hidden screen, but Annie's Jedi senses were off the charts, naming them all perfectly. But then things got tricky. The masters asked about Annie's feelings and his worry about his mom back on Tatooine. Annie was confused. What did that have to do with being a Jedi? Yoda, the ancient green guy with ears that could flap in the wind, explained. He said fear was the first step on the dark side's deadly path. And guess what? Yoda sensed a whole lot of fear in Annie. Night fell and Annie waited with bated breath. Finally, the council called them back. They acknowledged Annie's power, but they dropped a bomb. He was too old to be trained as a Jedi. Annie's world crumbled. But Jin, ever the loyal mentor, threw down his own lightsaber. He would coach Annie himself. Council be damned. The council wasn't thrilled, but they did agree to let Annie tag along with Jin on a mission to free Naboo from those bad guys in the Trade Federation. So Annie hopped back on the spaceship, ready for a galaxy-sized adventure. As Naboo loomed closer, Annie, excitement burning in his eyes, learned the starship's controls like they were his own pod racer. Landing wasn't exactly smooth. They plopped down in some swampy mess that made his sand-loving skin crawl. But hey, adventure rarely comes with a welcome mat. Their first stop, Gungan City, was a place that looked like it sprouted straight out of a swampy nightmare. Jar Jar, the walking klutz, was their ambassador, leading them to a giant hidden sacred city where they met the Big Cheese, Boss Nass, a Gungan with eyes like glowing algae. Now, buckle up for a surprise. It turned out Padme, the girl with the twilight eyes and the smile that could melt anyone's heart, well, she was actually Queen Amidala, ruler of Naboo. Talk about a royal disguise. So, Annie and the Queen, side by side, dropped to their knees before Boss Nass, begging for Gungan's help to kick the Trade Federation off their planet. Nass agrees. Annie's heart leapt. He was about to fight alongside a whole army of frog-faced warriors. As the crew buzzed with battle prep, Annie was part of a daring plan to retake the royal palace with Padme leading the charge. As they reached the royal hangar, jitters swarmed Annie's stomach like flies. Jin ordered him to stay put, hidden in a starfighter cockpit, no less. But Annie's pilot instincts kicked in when clanking droid brutes ambushed the Naboo troops. He blasted away with the starfighter's cannons, a little too excited and whoops, accidentally launched himself into space. Now, Annie loved pod racing, but soaring through the stars was a whole new thrill. He zipped and flipped through space, dodging laser blasts and feeling the force hum in his veins. And then he saw it, the droid control ship, that ugly metal machine controlling the droid army. Fueled by adrenaline and a dash of recklessness, Annie weaved his way inside, dodging mechanical claws and sparking wires. With a blast from his ship's own guns, Annie blew the droid control ship to kingdom come. Down below, the Trade Federation droids went haywire, and the Gungan army cheered, and Annie, well, let's just say he did a celebratory dance in his head for his unexpected success. He'd saved the day, the Gungans, and maybe even his own sand-loving skin. Anakin's escapades as a Padawan. After his master's death, Obi-Wan basically promised Anakin that he'd honor Qui-Gon Jinn's dying wish and train the kid as a Jedi. Fast forward, after kicking some butt and saving Naboo, there was this big parade thrown by the Naboo and the Gungans, celebrating their victory and newfound friendship ties. After all the partying, Anakin and the Jedi crew bounced from Naboo. And get this, it was the last time Anakin laid eyes on Amidala for a good 10 years. Crazy, right? Such is the life of a Jedi. Skywalker, growing up, got a bit too big for his boots with his insane Jedi skills. But deep down, he looked up to Kenobi like he was the Jedi God, thinking nobody could top his master. It's kinda sweet, really. After ditching his old life and losing Qui-Gon, Anakin stuck to Kenobi like glue. In a surprising turn of events, the guy even crashed on the floor next to Kenobi's bed during his Padawan rookie year, just to make sure his mentor didn't disappear in the middle of the night. Talk about attachment issues. They had their fair share of adventures, like the time Kenobi fell into a pit of Gundarks, and Skywalker played superhero and rescued him. But then there was this weird phase where Anakin shut himself off from the Force, like he thought avoiding it would make his problems disappear, but surprise, surprise, it didn't work out. He eventually got back on the Force train. As Kenobi's sidekick, Anakin had major trust issues with teachers who tried to correct him. The dude was always wondering if they were genuinely helping or just putting him in his place. He knew some people didn't want him in Jedi school in the first place. Still, there were some Jedi who believed in his potential. Emotion control wasn't Anakin's strong suit, and making friends was a struggle. Imagine being the chosen one with a bunch of Padawans side-eyeing you. Pretty lonely, right? Anakin's downtime was all about tinkering with random machinery he found outside the Jedi Temple. Oh, and don't get him started on the mom issues. He had some serious baggage about what happened to her. Life wasn't all lightsabers and glory for young Skywalker. By the time Anakin hit 12 in 29 BBY, he was already the cool kid who built his own lightsaber. When he saw this, Kenobi dropped this heavy line about the lightsaber being his life, all dramatic and Jedi-like. When Skywalker and Kenobi were gearing up for a sparring session in the Jedi Temple, Anakin hit his master with a deep question. Why do Jedi stick with lightsabers instead of other kyber crystal-powered weapons? Kenobi, being the wise Jedi master, used the Force to snatch Anakin's lightsaber and drop some important knowledge. He talked about his wild concept back in the day, two short lightsabers connected by a chain. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Anyway, Kenobi explained that wielding a lightsaber wasn't just about swinging it around. It was all about intent and thought. You have to understand your responsibilities before drawing that weapon. It's like a Jedi code thing, showing that they're protectors, not just out there to wreck stuff. Jedi Philosophy 101, courtesy of Master Kenobi. So, a while later, Skywalker was chilling in the Jedi Temple training area, waiting for Kenobi to join him for a sparring sesh. They started off with some light-hearted banter, but once the duel kicked in, Anakin went all in with the aggression. Kenobi, being the wise Jedi, warned him that going all out out like that wasn't the Jedi way, to protect life and all that stuff. Anakin was not happy with this advice, thinking his aggressive moves would seal the deal. He even argued that mercy wasn't going to help him win a fight. The duel got intense, with Anakin pushing Kenobi into a corner, demanding a surrender. But Kenobi, being the sneak he was, slipped away and kept the fight going. Anakin was so blinded by the need to win that he thought the duel was over when he knocked away Kenobi's lightsaber. Rookie mistake. Kenobi called him out, saying he was too obsessed with proving himself. The Jedi Master went all out, showing Anakin that his hunger for victory was holding him back. Kenobi handed Anakin's lightsaber back with a smile, giving him a Jedi wisdom talk. They walked out of the room together and both remembered the epic duel for years. It was Jedi training session for the history books, and just another day in the life of Skywalker and Kenobi. Vader's whirlwind romance. About 10 years or so after the whole Naboo fiasco, Anakin and Kenobi were knee-deep in the Separatist crisis. They just wrapped up a mission on Ansion, dealing with some border dispute. But back on Coruscant, things took a wild turn when there was an assassination attempt on Senator Padme Amidala, our queen from back in the day. So the Jedi Council decided to play bodyguards and sent Anakin and Kenobi to protect Padme. Anakin, now 19 and a bit of a Jedi hotshot, was all excited to see Padme again. He'd been thinking about her every day since they parted ways. Meanwhile, Padme, in her first year as a senator, had also thought about the boy she met on Tatooine. She even sent her handmaiden, Sabe, to free slaves on Tatooine, but she had no luck finding Anakin's mum. When Anakin promised Padme he would find out who was behind her assassination attempt, Obi-Wan wasn't thrilled. He was more into the whole protection gig than going on a detective mission. But Anakin had a crush on Padme, and when she retreated to her chambers, he was disappointed, thinking she hardly recognized him despite all his efforts. Later that night, Anakin and Padme hatched a plan to use her as bait to catch the assassin. Obi-Wan was not thrilled at the idea, but Anakin was convinced he could sense something in Padme's room, even with the cameras covered. Kenobi was skeptical, and when he noticed Anakin's tiredness, the truth came out. Anakin was having constant nightmares about his mum, and it was messing with his head and emotions. Being the wise Jedi, Obi-Wan warned Anakin to control his emotions, saying politicians couldn't be trusted and his little crush would do him no good. That led to a debate about whether all politicians were corrupt. Anakin was all in for Palpatine, thinking he was a good guy, but then they sensed trouble in Padme's room and rushed in, promptly saving her from some venomous critters. Thinking on his feet, Obi-Wan grabbed the assassin's droid at the window while Anakin rushed to some speeders parked near Padme's place and caught up to his master, who was free-falling like a Jedi daredevil. Anakin caught him, no big deal, and they kept chasing the bounty hunter speeder. The bounty hunter decided to play hide-and-seek, nosediving toward the lower levels of Coruscant. Anakin, being the expert pilot he was, caught up in no time. The hunter tried to shake them in some sky tunnels, but Anakin took a quicker route. They thought they'd lost her, but Anakin spotted her below, pulled a crazy mid-air jump, and latched onto her speeder. He realized she was a changeling, thanks to a close encounter. Anakin went lightsaber crazy on her speeder, messing up the controls. The hunter bailed, and the speeder crashed near a club. She limped away into a club, and Anakin was ready to follow, but Obi-Wan, being the responsible Jedi Master, stopped him, handed back his lightsaber, and said that lightsaber was his life. Such an Obi-Wan thing to do. They headed into the club, and Kenobi dropped this line about having a feeling Anakin would be the death of him. Anakin was all dramatic, claiming Obi-Wan was like a father to him. Inside the club, Obi-Wan told Anakin to search around, and the hunter tried to sneak up on Kenobi at the bar. But Obi-Wan was no fool. He ignited his lightsaber, spun around, and chopped her arm off. Anakin and Obi-Wan dragged her out for a bit of interrogation in the alley, but just when they were about to get some answers, a mysterious figure shot a toxic dart into her neck. Cue the suspenseful music. Alright, so after that crazy speeder chase and the dart drama, the Jedi Council decided to split up Anakin and Obi-Wan. Anakin got his first solo mission. He had to protect Padme on Naboo. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, continued his detective work on Kamino. Anakin and Padme hopped on a refugee ship with R2-D2 and headed to Naboo. Once there, they swung by Padme's family home, and Anakin couldn't help but notice how much she loved the flower garden there. This guy had a really bad crush. Clearly, Amidala was not blind to Anakin's feelings, and he straight up told her he was in love. But Jedi rules dictated you can't form attachments, so she shut him down, even though she felt the same way. It was forbidden Jedi love at its finest. But wait, Anakin had more on his plate, nightmare of his mum suffering. So they decided to hit up Tatooine to rescue her. On Tatooine, they found Watto, who spilt the beans that Shmi was sold to some moisture farmer. The couple headed to the farm, only to find out Shmi got kidnapped by Tusken raiders a month earlier and was feared dead. Anakin, fueled by grief and rage, took his stepbrother's swoop bike and went on a Tusken slaughtering mission. He found his mom in a Tusken camp, but she was tied up and didn't make it. Anakin was hit with guilt and pain, swearing he'd become so powerful he could stop people he loved from dying. He brought Shmi's body back to the homestead. They had a funeral, and Anakin was left with a boatload of guilt, thinking he failed her and failed as a Jedi too. And now he was haunted by the idea of letting go of the people he loved. Jedi life was clearly not all that easy for the Chosen. So, after the whole drama on Tatooine, Anakin got a message from Obi-Wan about separatists plotting something sinister on Geonosis. They beamed the message to the Jedi Council on Coruscant, and Anakin, along with Amidala, jetted off to Geonosis. They sneaked into one of the factories, and guess what? Anakin's lightsaber bit the dust. Tough luck. But the real trouble started when they got captured and tossed into an arena with plans for a beastly execution. But hold up, they managed to dodge the creepy crawlies only to face a battalion of droidicas. Just when things looked bleak, a Jedi rescue squad swooped in, handed Anakin a borrowed lightsaber, and they dove into a brawl against a mountain of battle droids. But lo and behold, Master Yoda showed up with the Republic's new Grand Army, and they all hopped onto gunships, leaving all that chaos on the battlefield behind. As the clones clashed with the Separatist droid army, Anakin spotted Count Dooku in the mix. When Amidala got knocked off a ship, Anakin was ready to ditch the mission and go after her. He even argued with Kenobi, saying he didn't care if he got booted from the Jedi Order. But Kenobi talked some sense into him, reminding him Amidala had duties that she'd stick to, too. They tailed Dooku to a secret hangar, lightsabers blazing. It didn't end well. Both Jedi got whooped, and Anakin lost his right forearm. Yoda jumped in and faced off with Dooku, but the Sith slipped away. And just like that, the Clone Wars kicked off, and Anakin scored a shiny new cybernetic arm. Jedi life was pretty crazy, isn't that right? After all that drama on Geonosis, Obi-Wan headed back to Coruscant, and Anakin, well, he's on a different mission. Naboo, baby. Guess why? Amidala and Anakin sneakily tied the knot there. Just them and their trusty droids R2-D2 and C-3PO as witnesses. It was a totally secret wedding. Still recovering from the Geonosis craziness, Anakin got to sit back and relax on Naboo for a bit. Honeymoon time. Jedi life was more than just lightsaber fights now for the infamous Chosen One. Anakin's participation in the Clone Wars. Fresh off that hairy Geonosis mess, Annie whipped up a brand new lightsaber to replace his fallen buddy. The war was heating up fast, and Annie found himself bumping elbows with Dooku's goons more times than he cared to count. He stuck tight to his master, Kenobi, charging into battles on planets rockier than ever. As it turned out, the war had Annie leveling up faster than he could have imagined. The Council, seeing all his Jedi awesomeness, decided to skip the fancy ceremony and just slapped a big old Jedi Knight label on Annie. Bam! Say hello to General Skywalker, ready to lead the clones into battle and maybe even impress a certain queen with his shiny new title. This wasn't just about pod racing anymore, folks. Annie was a Jedi Knight, a war hero, and the galaxy's hottest young warrior. Buckle up, the Clone Wars are about to get wild, and Annie Skywalker's got his lightsaber ready and the Force buzzing in his veins. He's about to show the galaxy what a desert kid with a heart of gold and a knack for trouble can do. So Anakin was officially a Jedi Knight now, and they decided to make it legitimate with a knighting ceremony soon after. After that, he spent some quality time with Amidala. In a romantic move, he gave her a pendant made from his Padawan braid. Pretty sweet, right? After that, there was Skywalker leading the 501st Legion, and they were knee-deep in the Battle of Arantara. Rex, his right-hand clone, took a hit and went down. Skywalker, being the hero he was, went back for Rex, who was surprised as hell that the general bothered. Skywalker had this whole philosophy about leading from the front, and told Rex it should have been him in the hot seat instead. After that, it was bromance central between Skywalker and Rex. They started vibing, and Rex learned to appreciate Skywalker's renegade style. The Resolute, a rusty Venator-class Star Destroyer, was their favorite ride for soaring through the cosmos. The beginning of Anakin's fall. Soon after, Annie and Kenobi, Jedi buddies back from months of Outer Rim skirmishes, were immediately greeted by a sky full of droids and blaster fire above Coruscant. It turned out that General Grievous was hiding in his flagship, the Invisible Hand, messing with the Chancellor. Annie and Kenobi, with a squadron of clone pilots by their side, blasted through the droid swarm. Kenobi's ship got a little too close to the fire though. Smoke billowed, engines sputtered, and he was forced to crash land. Annie, ever the loyal student, refused to leave his master behind. He cleared out the droids, then dragged Kenobi, barely conscious, toward the Invisible Hand's hangar. The landing was more of a crash, but they were alive. A few droids buzzed around, but Annie's lightsaber made quick work of them. R2, his trusty little droid, scurried around, its beeps sounding frantic. It turns out that Palpatine was trapped at the top of the ship, dangling near oblivion. Sensing a trap, Annie felt a dark chill crawl up his spine. And guess what? He was right. Count Dooku, the Sith dude with the creepy smile, strolled in, ready for a lightsaber showdown. Kenobi, brave as always, took on Dooku first, but the Sith Lord, old and wrinkly, used his killer moves and knocked Kenobi out cold. Thinking he'd won, Dooku started taunting Annie, trying to turn his anger into a weapon. Big mistake. Annie's fury erupted like fire. He unleashed a whirlwind of lightsaber strikes, disarming Dooku and sending his hands flying. With his smiles and shifty eyes, Palpatine urged Annie to finish the job, kill Dooku, and end the threat. Hesitation flickered in Annie's eyes. Killing in cold blood wasn't the Jedi way, but the Chancellor's words, dripping with power and persuasion, chipped away at his resolve. In a moment of rage, Annie ignited the lightsaber and ended the Sith Lord's reign of terror. Regret washed over Annie almost immediately. He knew he'd crossed a line and embraced the darkness for a fleeting moment. But smooth as ever, Palpatine assured him he'd done the right thing. Annie, shaken but determined, didn't know yet that this was just the beginning of a dark path he had to navigate. Still reeling from Dooku's demise, Anakin hoisted Kenobi on his back, determined to get the butts off that metal monster. They scrambled for an escape route, but every elevator seemed completely locked down. Just when things were looking grim, the Republic cruiser outside started blasting the hand to Kingdom Come. The chaos gave Annie an idea. They'd use the elevator shaft as a makeshift escape pod. Hanging on for dear life, Annie and Kenobi plunged down the shaft, R2 whizzing alongside like a tiny metal cheerleader. Suddenly, the ship lurched, gravity kicking back in and turning the shaft into a death trap. Kenobi snapped awake just in time, and together they used the Force to catapult themselves out right before the reactivated elevator turned them into pancakes. Talk about a close call. But their luck ran out fast. A ray shield trapped them, and Grievous, that evil bucket of bolts, showed up to gloat. Annie couldn't resist taking a jab at the General's height, but the laughter died fast when R2, blasting his rusty circuits on overdrive, caused a distraction that let Kenobi snatch his lightsaber with the Force, freeing himself and then Annie. Lightsabers ignited. They sliced through Grievous's guard droids like butter, but the cyborg coward used a droid staff to blow the bridge window, exposing them to the vacuum of space. Annie and Kenobi, quick as ever, grabbed onto consoles, holding on for dear life as the bridge depressurized. Grievous craftily jettisoned all the escape pods, leaving them stranded aboard a falling spaceship. But Annie, the expert pilot, took control of the mangled hand, trying to slow its descent towards Coruscant. The ship, battered and bruised, barely responded to his commands. It broke in half, hurtling towards the city. Annie, gritting his teeth and channeling the Force, managed to crash land the hand on a deserted landing strip, saving the Chancellor from becoming a city-crushing pancake. They were bruised, battered, and shaken, but Annie had pulled off another impossible feat. He'd brought Grievous's reign of terror to an end, saved the Chancellor, and landed a broken spaceship, almost without breaking a sweat. After that whole Grievous near-death fiasco, Annie and Kenobi escorted the Chancellor back to the Senate building, parting ways soon after. Still buzzing to see Padme after months of droid dust and blaster fire, Annie spotted her hiding behind a column. Excuses were made to senators, smiles flashed, and Annie was reunited with his secret wife in a blink. The Outer Rim had been rough, but all Annie could think about was Padme. So when she told him that she was pregnant, his heart soared higher than he'd ever thought possible. Sure, there was worry about their forbidden romance being exposed, but mostly there was joy. The happiest moment of Annie's life, hands down. Plans for a little Skywalker were hatching. Naboo's Lake Country would be the nursery, and Padme would head there soon to get things ready. But that same night, Annie's bliss turned to sand with a nightmare. Padme dying in childbirth, just like his mom. The fear, it clawed him, cold and sharp. He couldn't lose Padme, not like he'd lost his mother. Padme, ever the calming presence, tried to soothe his fears. It was just a dream, she said. But Annie, he couldn't shake the dread. This baby, their blessing, felt cursed. He refused to seek help from Kenobi, but the next day, he found himself pouring his heart out to Yoda. The ancient Jedi Master, wise as usual, spoke of death being a part of the natural cycle and told him to let go of fear. But letting go? That was easier said than done, especially when it came to Padme. Annie was at a crossroads, fear clawing at him, joy bubbling inside. The Force swirled around him, the future a hazy storm. One thing was for sure, being a Jedi husband and soon-to-be dad was a whole new adventure, and Danny Skywalker, with his mop of sand-colored hair and a heart full of love, was about to find out if he could handle it all. Meanwhile, back on Coruscant, things were starting to smell fishy. Chancellor Palpatine was flexing his newfound power, and the Jedi Council was getting twitchy at the lack of democracy. When the Senate voted to give Palpatine even more power to end the war, Annie was all for it. He just wanted the blaster fire to stop, you know. But Kenobi, ever the cautious one, warned Annie to keep an eye on Palpatine. It turns out the Chancellor had a secret mission for Annie. He wanted him to be his personal Jedi rep on the Council, a move that would make the other Masters grumble at the intrusion. Seeing no other choice, the Council let Annie sit with them but wouldn't make him a Master. Grumpy at their decision, Annie felt like they were treating him like a rookie. Kenobi stayed silent, which just made Annie even madder. Finally, he took his seat on the Council, feeling like he was shunned and looked down upon. Later, Obi-Wan secretly confessed that the Council only let Annie sit with them so he could spy on Palpatine. Annie wasn't thrilled about playing double agent, but hey, duty calls. Meanwhile, Padme and some other senators, worried about Palpatine's power trip, started a petition to get him to hand back some of his emergency powers. But Annie, thanks to some sly manipulations from Palpatine, started thinking Padme might have her own secret agenda. One fancy night at the opera, Palpatine really turned on the charm to the max. He planted seeds of doubt about the Jedi Order in Annie's mind, whispering about how the Sith weren't all bad and the Jedi weren't all good. He even dropped a juicy story about a super powerful Sith who could cheat death, enough to make any Jedi curious. By the end of the night, Annie was saying goodbye to Kenobi, thanking him for everything, but secretly feeling like he was on a whole new path. The Force was humming around him, whispering of choices and shadows. One thing was clear. Annie Skywalker, Jedi Knight, secret husband, and soon-to-be spy, was in for a wild ride. Back on Coruscant, things were getting really heated. Annie and Mace Windu huddled with Yoda and the Jedi Masters, holograms flickering with news of Obi-Wan facing off against Grievous on Utapau. Windu, ever the suspicious one, sent Annie to Palpatine's office, a little Jedi spy mission to peek at the Chancellor's reaction. But Annie's world flipped for good after that interaction. Palpatine smoothly let slip a secret that chilled Annie to the bone. He used the dark side of the Force. The Sith Lord they'd been chasing all this time had been right under their noses. But Palpatine, he played Annie like a cheap plastic toy. If he kept Palpatine's secret, he dangled the promise of saving Padme, the same Padme haunting Annie's dreams with visions of her death. Annie, his mind swirling with decisions, stumbled back to the Jedi Temple, loyalty to the Order battling with his love for Padme. He spilled the beans to Mace Windu, who realized they had to do something, and fast. Windu stormed off to arrest Palpatine, leaving Annie in a mess of doubt and fear. Palpatine's words echoed in his head, a poisonous whisper promising power and the one thing Annie craved, saving Padme. Torn between duty and desperation, Annie made a choice that would change the galaxy forever. He raced to Palpatine's office, arriving just as Windu had the Sith Lord cornered. Windu raised his lightsaber for the final blow, but Annie intervened, blinded by fear and Palpatine's manipulations. Annie's lightsaber sliced through Windu's hand in a blink, disarming him and sending him plummeting through the window, courtesy of a Force lightning blast from Palpatine. The deed was done. Annie had crossed a line, his Jedi vows melting away like sandcastles in the tide. He'd chosen fear over faith, the dark side over the light. And as Palpatine, the true Sith Lord, rose to power, Annie Skywalker, Jedi Knight and secret Sith apprentice, took his first faltering steps down a path that would lead him to the edge of darkness itself. Annie was a tangled mess of emotions, guilt over Windu, fear for Padme, and fury at the Jedi Order gnawing at him. He'd crossed a line and embraced the darkness, and there was no going back. To save Padme, the woman he loved more than anyone in the world, he pledged himself to Sidious, the ultimate snake in the galactic grass. His new Sith name, Darth Vader, felt like a death toll, heavy with power and prophecy. Without wasting any more time, Sidious declared the Jedi enemies of the Republic, unleashing a storm of betrayal across the galaxy. Vader, his heart now frozen, led the attack on the Jedi Temple. Younglings, wide-eyed and trusting, called him for help, only to be cut down by his lightsaber, a brutal glimpse into the lure of the dark side. The temple echoed with screams and clashing blades as Vader carved a bloody path through his former brothers and sisters. Across the galaxy, clone troopers turned on their Jedi generals, puppets dancing to Sidious's twisted tune. Order 66, a cold wind of death, swept through the Jedi ranks, leaving chaos and carnage in its wake. Finally, Vader returned to Padme, his face a mask of lies. He spun a tale of Jedi treason, lacing his voice with manufactured anger. Padme, her eyes filled with disbelief and a flicker of fear, listened to the man she loved crumble before her. He kissed her goodbye, his touch like ice against her warmth, and fled to Mustafar, a volcanic furnace, simmering with his rage. There, on that fiery wasteland, Vader unleashed his fury on the Separatist leaders, their screams swallowed by the hissing lava. His eyes, once blue, now crackled with yellow and red, a reflection of the inferno within. Meanwhile, Sidious, reveling in his puppet's success, choked the Republic and transformed it into the Galactic Empire, with himself as Emperor. Vader stood alone on a balcony after his mission, shedding a single tear. A tear for the man he used to be, for the light he'd extinguished. But the path he'd chosen was a one-way trip paved with darkness and whispers of power. He was Darth Vader now, a Jedi killer, Sith apprentice, and the architect of a galaxy drowning in shadows. This was his path, and the galaxy would tremble beneath his iron fist. Vader, now full of dark side powers and lava-forged rage, spotted Padme's ship landing soon enough. She'd come for him, hoping against hope to shake some sense into her fallen husband. Kenobi, his loyal Jedi master, had spilled the beans about Vader's Sithy side, but Padme, ever the optimist, clung to the belief that Annie, her pure and honest Jedi husband, was still in there, somewhere. Vader, blinded by power and whispers of galactic domination, spun a fairy tale about ruling the galaxy together, hand in hand. He even promised to overthrow Sidious, the ultimate bait for a woman who hated that slimy snake of a man more than sand in her boots. But Padme was wise and good, and she saw through his lies. Her heart shattered. She begged him to ditch the dark side for good. Vader, his anger burning bright and hot, saw only betrayal in her eyes. Kenobi, that sneaky Jedi, must have turned her against him. Blinded by rage and the dark side's poisonous whispers, Vader unleashed his fury on Padme, choking her with the Force until her eyes fluttered shut. The horror of his own actions clawed at him, but Vader, ever the master of deflection, blamed Kenobi for everything. Kenobi tried to reason with his fallen friend, but found his words swallowed by the roar of lava and Vader's twisted vision of the galaxy. Their duel, a fiery dance of lightsabers and shattered metal, tore through the Separatist building. Crumbling platforms and gushing lava became their battleground, a fitting backdrop for the death of their friendship. Finally, they clashed on the riverbank, Kenobi claiming the high ground and warning Vader yet again. Blinded by arrogance and rage, Vader leaped, only to be met with a symphony of clanging sabers and searing pain. His limbs, once tools of Jedi grace, now lay scattered like hunted scavengings, leaving only his cybernetic arm as a grim reminder of his fall. Screaming his hate at the sky, Vader tumbled towards the lava, a broken husk of the man he once was. Kenobi, his heart heavy with grief and regret, watched as the flames licked at Vader's fallen form. He took Anakin's lightsaber, a painful reminder of what he'd lost, and left with Padme, the galaxy's future now uncertain. Alone on the burning riverbank, Vader screamed his hate into the void. The dark side had promised power, but all it had delivered was pain and loss. As the flames danced around him, he knew with a cold certainty that he was Darth Vader now, and there was no turning back. Vader, now half man, half molten slag, lay groaning on the Mustafar riverbank. Once a temple of Jedi grace, his body was a twisted wreck, scarred by lava and poisoned by ash. He was a shadow of Anakin Skywalker, lost to the dark side and the fires of his own choices. But Darth Sidious, ever the opportunist, wouldn't let his new Sith toy burn out just yet. He swooped into Mustafar, scooped Vader up, and whisked him back to Coruscant, where the galaxy's best scientists were assembled. Sidious wasn't about to lose his shiny new Vader just yet. 2 days of non-stop tinkering later, they strapped Vader into a tight black suit. Wires snaked around him, tubes poked and prodded, and metal arms replaced the ones he'd lost to Kenobi's blade. Finally, with a clang and a hiss, the helmet slammed shut, sealing Vader in his iron cocoon. A flicker of fear, raw and primal, crossed Vader's eyes before the helmet swallowed him whole. He sucked in a breath, the air filtered and sterilized, a far cry from the ash-choked inferno he'd left behind. Darth Vader, the Sith Lord and monster, was reborn. He was more machine than man now, a walking nightmare fueled by rage and the iron will of the Emperor. Anakin Skywalker was dead, buried under layers of metal and dark side sludge. Darth Vader, his dark reflection, now stood in his place, and as he took his first shaky steps, the galaxy trembled. Anticipation thick in the air. This is where the real fun, the real darkness begins. The era of the Empire. 2 years after Order 66 turned the galaxy into a frozen wasteland of fear, Vader found himself trudging through the endless white of a snowy moon. He wasn't there for a snowball fight with snowtroopers, though. He was hunting ghosts, specifically the ghosts of his past. Deep beneath the snow and ice, the wreckage of a Venator Star Destroyer, a tomb of the Republic era, awaited. Picking through the metal bones of the fallen giant, Vader stumbled upon a chilling relic, a lightsaber, half frozen but humming with faint blue energy. It was Ahsoka's, his former Padawan, a reminder of a time before the dark side swallowed him whole. A squawk cut through the icy silence as the blade sparked to life. A strange bird circled overhead, its gaze fixed on Vader. A flicker of warmth, buried beneath layers of rage and regret, stirred within Vader in that frozen moment. Somewhere, somehow, Ahsoka was alive. He couldn't sense her or reach out, but the bird, a feathered messenger from the past, was a sign of the impossible truth. Yet hope was a dangerous ember in Vader's heart, one he quickly doused with cold logic. No proof, no presence, just a bird and a wish. Easier to bury the pain, the memories under another layer of ice, to assume she was gone, another causality of his fall. He deactivated the lightsaber, the blue glow fading away, turned away from the wreckage. Ahsoka's ghost and the haunting bird receding into the endless white. He carried the lightsaber, a trophy of a life he'd shattered, constant reminder of what he'd lost and the man he used to be. The dark side had won, but a tiny spark of his old self still flickered somewhere, a stubborn ember in the frozen wasteland of Vader's soul. As the galaxy's resident bad boy, Vader wasn't just chilling in his lava-side penthouse on Mustafar. He was building a giant metal palace, Fortress Vader, to make all the other Sith Lords jealous. Meanwhile, his Inquisitors, those creepy Force-hounders, were setting up shop on a nearby water moon, Nur. Think of it as Hogwarts for bad guys, but with less singing and robes games and more torture and lightsaber fights. One fine day in 14 BBY, Vader rolled into Fortress Inquisitorius like a black dust storm. He was after a particular list, names of Force-sensitive kiddos ripe for turning into bad guys. But surprise, surprise, things were a mess. Turns out the second sister, one of Vader's Inquisitor goons, messed up big time. Not only did she lose the list, but she also let two surviving Jedi, Cal Kestis and Sia Junda, slip through her fingers. Junda, wise and brave, was trying to talk some sense into the second sister, urging her to ditch the dark side and join the Jedi party. But alas, Vader decided to crash the party, his ominous breathing silencing the room. Junda recognized Vader instantly, practically trembling in fear, her eyes wide. Vader wasn't in the mood for chit-chat. He flicked his wrist, sending the second sister flying out the window like a discarded side piece. Junda got the Force choke treatment for her Jedi pep talk, and Kestis, bless his brave heart, tried attacking Vader with his lightsaber. Unfortunately for him, Vader deflected every blow with impossible ease and casually choked Kestis with the Force just to show him who was boss. Quick as a blur, Kestis saw his chance. He yanked a giant metal object toward Vader, forcing the Sith Lord to dodge. Seizing the moment, Kestis hightailed it out of there, Vader hot on his heels. This game of cat and mouse, Jedi and Sith, was far from over. Cal thought he had Vader beat, with his Jedi powers and all, when he managed to land a lightsaber right in the Sith Lord's gut. But Vader was brutal and just shrugged it off and sent Cal flying. Cal's droid, ever the loyal sidekick, tried to short-circuit Vader's life support suit, but Vader quickly shut it down. By this point, Cal was toast, lightsaber stuck in the wall and Vader breathing down his neck. Yet, just when all hope seemed lost, Junda, blaster blazing and lightsaber humming, burst onto the scene. Impressed by her fire, Vader noted her strong connection to the dark side. Junda, fueled by rage and fear, actually managed to knock Vader off his feet with a Force blast, a move that even made the Sith Lord blink. But Vader, ever the master manipulator, tried to turn Junda's anger against her, whispering sweet nothings about embracing the darkness. Junda, though shaken, held firm, refusing to fall for his tricks. Vader, seeing his chance for a 2-for-1 deal, lunged at both Junda and Cal, lightsaber poised to end their rebellion. But Junda was a Jedi warrior to the core. She raised a Force barrier, buying Cal precious seconds. With a final desperate lunge, Cal used the Force to shatter the windows, unleashing a torrent of water into the complex. The water rushed in, forcing Vader to focus on holding back the flood, giving Cal and Junda a chance to escape. They scrambled through the newly created opening, leaving Vader to his watery fate. Cal and Junda, battered and bruised but alive, slipped out into the night, the echo of Vader's roar fading behind them. They had faced the ultimate evil and lived to tell the tale, but the fight was far from over. The dark side still loomed, and Vader, wounded but not defeated, would be back.
Kenobi is already ours.
Vader hunts for revenge. Vader, lightsaber humming with the thrill of an opportunity to slice Kenobi into Obi-Wan-shaped pieces, was back on Mustafar, stewing in his lava-heated palace. The game wasn't over to him. Vader still craved a rematch with his former teacher, the itch for vengeance burning hotter than Mustafar's core. Enter the third sister, Vader's Inquisitor sidekick who'd lured Kenobi out with Leia as bait. Vader smoothly promised her the Grand Inquisitor gig if she delivered Kenobi on a platter. He knew she was playing her own game, but hey, a helpful pawn was better than no pawn at all. He reminded the third sister that failure wasn't on the menu. Vader's wrath was the main course, served with a side of Force choke. Newsflash, Obi-Wan was spotted on Mapuzo, cape billowing like a sandstorm. Vader marched in with his Inquisitor posse and stormtrooper entourage. Terror was his perfume, and screams were his applause as he tore through the streets, reminding everyone who was boss. Obi-Wan tried to slip away, but Vader wouldn't let him. Their duel, a dance of fire and fury, unfolded in a quarry, his voice dripping with venom. Vader mocked Obi-Wan's faded Jedi glow. Obi-Wan, desperate and worried, ran for safety, but Vader cornered him again, lifting him off the ground with the Force like a child's rag doll. Then came the flames. Vader, a cruel puppeteer, set the rocks ablaze with his lightsaber, dragging Obi-Wan through the fire. Just when Vader was about to add a barbecue Jedi to his list of accomplishments, a blaster ripped through the air, taking down his stormtroopers. The flames roared back to life, giving Obi-Wan's rescuers the chance to whisk him away. Vader, fuming, was not amused. He grabbed the third sister, her betrayal choking her faster than his grip. Her eyes bulged, fear a bitter taste in her mouth. But ever the pragmatist, Vader loosened his grip just enough for her to wheeze out a revelation. She had placed a tracker on Leia's droid, a golden ticket to lead him to the rebel hideout. Vader, grudgingly impressed, let the third sister live, another pawn in his twisted game. But make no mistake, her leash was short. Another failure, and she'd be force-tossed into the nearest lava river. The hunt for Kenobi and the rebels was far from over, and Vader, his dark side smirk widening, couldn't wait for the next round. Vader, lost in a force-fueled flashback of a lightsaber duel with his former self in Kenobi was jolted back to reality by his captain's voice droning about the third sister. Forgetting everything else, Vader wanted Kenobi's location, stat. The third sister, breathless and probably peeing her inquisitor pants, told him of Jabim, leading to a swift promotion and a knee-bending ceremony. Course set, Vader unleashed his inner control freak, locking down the rebellion's base. Landing on Jabim, Vader, fueled by the dark side, barged into the hangar, ready for a Kenobi showdown. He ripped apart Kenobi's transport like it was a piece of paper, only to discover it was a Jedi-style fake-out by Kenobi. The actual transport, with Obi-Wan in it, soared off into the sunset, leaving Vader fuming. It turns out that Kenobi remembered that time in the Jedi Temple when Vader, blinded by rage, fell for a similar trick. This time, Kenobi used Vader's single-mindedness against him, outsmarting him. The third sister, seeing Vader's meltdown, saw her chance. Lightsaber in hand, she lunged, aiming for the Sith Lord. Vader swatted a blade away like a pesky fly. He tossed the third sister aside, but she was stubborn and charged again. This time, Vader disarmed her with a flick of his wrist, then force-tossed her. Desperate, the third sister activated her lightsaber's double-bladed mode. Vader, unimpressed, stopped the spinning blades with the Force, then ripped the lightsaber in half, tossing one hilt back at her with ease, disarming her again before plunging his lightsaber into her gut. As the third sister crumpled, Vader revealed he knew about her betrayal all along. He just used her, a pawn in his game of cat and mouse with Kenobi. Now useless and discarded, he left her to bleed out, a chilling reminder that in Vader's world, loyalty was fleeting. So, soon enough, Vader was back on the Devastator, hot on the trail of Kenobi's freighter. Kenobi, being the sneaky Jedi he was, decided to bail out on the freighter and head to a rocky moon. Not one to let a Jedi slip away, Vader followed him there in a shuttle, ready for a showdown. When Vader found Kenobi, it was an anger-fueled duel all over again. They exchanged some heated words, with Vader doing his whole menacing villain routine and Kenobi standing firm. Then, boom! Lightsabers ignited, and it was game on. The duel got intense, with Vader pulling all sorts of force tricks to try and take down Kenobi. Kenobi, however, refused to be defeated that fast. Using his Jedi abilities, he was easily able to defend himself against the Sith Lord. He hit Vader hard, succeeded in breaking his armor on the chest, and slashed him on the back. When Kenobi hit Vader's helmet and Anakin's scarred face became visible, he took a step back in utter shock. Seeing what had become of Vader made Kenobi very sad. Yet Vader did not intend to be merciful to himself or to his old master. He declared that Anakin was gone and that he was all that was left. Ouch. Finally, Kenobi came to terms with the existence of Vader, understanding that his pupil had succumbed to the dark side for good. Vader was filled with rage and promised to become more powerful in order to defeat Kenobi completely. Back at Fortress Vader, Vader reported to the Emperor, swearing he wouldn't let Kenobi slip away again. But the Emperor, being the manipulative puppet master he was, hinted that Vader was still stuck in the past. Always the loyal servant, Vader swore allegiance to the Emperor, but deep down, he knew Kenobi was not just another Jedi on his hit list.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
Vader begins his war on the rebellion. Shortly after, Vader was knee-deep in the Death Star project. Yeah, it was not his dream gig, but someone had to be the bouncer for this giant space marble, and who else knew every nut and bolt like the back of his metal hand? One day, while soaking in his bacta tank like a prune in a bathtub, Vader's servant buzzed in with a juicy update. Krennic, the Imperial smarty pants in charge of construction, had stumbled into Vader's lair, tail between his legs and a laundry list of Death Star woes. Turns out, the project was riddled with a ton of problems. The biggest headache, Galen Erso, the brainiac behind the Death Star super laser, turned out to be a rebel sympathizer. Whispers flew that he might have spilled the beans about the project, leaving Vader fuming hotter than that Mustafar lava. He chewed Krennic out for blowing up Jeddah City, the Kyber crystal mine fueling the Death Star's firepower. Vader had spun a lie for the Senate, claiming Jeddah was just a tragic mining accident and the Death Star, never heard of it, pal. But back to Erso. Vader made it crystal clear. That risky Death Star needed to be leak-proof, or Krennic would be the one whose blood would decorate its walls. Elated at Vader's apparent green light, Krennic started buttering up the Sith Lord, hoping for a favorable chat with the Emperor. Vader wasn't in the mood for flattery, though. He silenced Krennic fast, squeezing his throat with the Force and a chilling reminder to not get choked by his own ambition. Vader might have hated the Death Star, but he was its gatekeeper, its Sith-powered security system. And anyone who messed with his domain, well, let's just say they wouldn't live to regret it. The Death Star project was a ticking time bomb, and Vader, with his dark side swagger and Force choke, was the only one keeping it from blowing up the whole galaxy. Vader, the galaxy's resident Iron Fist, just couldn't catch a break. panic. The rebels, pesky nuts buzzing around his dark side aura, had pulled off a heist on Scarif, snagging the Death Star blueprints right under his nose. He stormed onto the crippled rebel ship on a rampage of rage, stormtroopers swarming at his heels. The rebels, scrappy underdogs fighting for freedom, were scrambling to escape. One brave bunch copied the plans onto a data disk, a tiny golden key to blowing up the Empire's shiny new toy. They were almost home, the airlock beckoning like an escape hatch to freedom when fate cruelly slammed the door shut. Stuck in a metal coffin, the disk clutched in sweaty hands, they waited for the inevitable. Fury crackling around him like static, Vader sliced through the remaining rebels like a scythe through wheat. He closed in on the trooper with the prize, lightsaber humming an angry tune. But in a last act of defiance, the rebel shoved the disc to his buddy behind the jammed door before Vader's blade plunged through him. With a flick of his wrist, Vader ripped the door open, scattering the remaining rebels like bowling pins. But it was too late. The other rebel, clutching the precious disc, had already launched himself into the void, a human meteor streaking towards the Tantive 4, the last hope of the rebellion. The ship blasted off, a middle finger to the Empire, leaving Vader fuming on the mangled corpse of the rebel ship. The plans, his to protect, had slipped through his grasp, entrusted to his own daughter, Leia Organa. Vader meets his son. The Millennium Falcon, a rickety excuse for a spaceship, got snagged in the Death Star's tractor beam like a fly in a spider web. The galaxy's resident buzzkill, Vader, figured they were smuggling those stolen Death Star plans back to Leia. He swaggered onto the ship, all black metal and chrome menace, expecting to snatch the blueprints and maybe have a chat with his daughter over a menu of tea and torture. But the ship was empty, and the crew vanished like desert ghosts. Vader, suspicious as always, ordered the Falcon scanned from top to bottom, and then a tremor in the Force, a ripple of something familiar. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the old Jedi Master, was lurking somewhere on the ship. Suddenly, Leia's release started making sense because who else could outsmart Vader like that? Vader, helmet crackling with anticipation, stalked off to find his former teacher, lightsaber humming a sinister lullaby. He found Kenobi by a control pane. The duel that followed was a clash of titans, old master versus fallen apprentice. Fueled by dark-side rage, Vader saw Kenobi's fading strength like a sputtering engine. But wise as ever, Kenobi dropped a truth bomb. Even if Vader killed him, he wouldn't win. Why? Because Vader's son, Luke Skywalker, who was about to board the Falcon with Leia and a motley crew of rebels, would become more powerful than Vader could ever imagine. The fight raged, lightsabers singing their deadly tune as Kenobi led Vader on a merry chase through the Death Star's corridors. They ended up near the Falcon's escape route just as Luke and Leia were about to blast off. Vader, lightsaber still buzzing, struck where his master stood, expecting a crumpled body, a final victory. But Obi-Wan played him. Poof, gone, his body dissolving into the Force like desert mist. Vader, absolutely fuming, clawed at the empty robes, desperate for proof of his kill. The rebellion, meanwhile, were making their grand escape. The Falcon screeched toward freedom, but Vader, the galaxy's ultimate party pooper, tried to reach them before the door slammed shut. Just as he lunged, the hangar door shut tight, sealed by a rookie shot from none other than young Luke Skywalker. Vader had been thwarted by his own son. Later, Vader and Tarkin, the Emperor's resident villains, huddled over a hologram. A tracker, nestled on the Falcon, promised to lead them to the rebel base, a consolation prize for their bruised egos. Across the galaxy, Yoda, the tiny green guy with the big ears, felt the echoes of Vader's duel with Kenobi through the Force. He sensed something new in Vader, a loneliness that gnawed at the Sith Lord's dark heart. It almost made Yoda reach out and offer Vader a bit of consolation and a chat about his feelings. Almost. Then, self-doubt, that nasty feeling, crept in. Yoda blamed himself, a knot of regret festering in his ancient gut. He hadn't noticed Anakin's descent, hadn't reached out, hadn't stopped his slide into darkness. Maybe, just maybe, Vader wasn't just a monster, but a lost soul in desperate need of help. Luckily for him, Vader played his trap card right. With the Death Star's tracker snuggled in its belly, the Falcon led them straight to the rebel hideout on Yavin 4. The moon trembled under the shadow of the Death Star, a giant metal fist poised to crush the rebellion. But the rebels, plucky underdogs with stars in their eyes, weren't going down without a fight. Their rickety X-Wings and Y-Wings swarmed the Death Star, buzzing gnats against the planet-sized superweapon. They had a secret weapon, a tiny thermal exhaust port, the station's Achilles heel. One lucky shot, a chain reaction, and boom goes the Death Star. Tarkin scoffed, calling the Death Star invulnerable. Vader, though, his dark side senses tingling, felt a flicker of unease. 30 rebel starfighters, tiny specks against the Death Star's bulk, were slipping through the turbo laser hall. He ordered his own fighters to hunt them down, teeth bared for the kill. A brave squadron peeled off from the rest, heading straight for the exhaust port like moths drawn to a flame. flame. Vader, with his TIE fighter, a sleek black predator, joined the fray. He tore through the rebel ranks, his red blade carving a bloody path. Pilots died, ships exploded, and the Force sang a deadly symphony in his head. He almost had them. One lone pilot, young and with the Force crackling around him like static, was the last obstacle. Vader, like a mechanical angel of death, lined him up, ready to deliver the final blow. But then the Falcon, piloted by the princess and a smuggler, swooped in, sending one of Vader's escorts spinning into oblivion. Before the Falcon could finish the job, his other escort, in a moment of comic incompetence, clipped Vader's wing. His TIE fighter tumbled and descended, and Vader vanished into the endless void. The Death Star, its doom sealed by a farm boy's laser blast and a series of lucky accidents, exploded in a glorious fireworks display. The Empire, its pride shattered, reeled from the blow. Bruised and humiliated, Vader floated in the cold embrace of space, his dark side fury simmering into a cold vow of vengeance. Still smarting from his Death Star debacle, Vader was back in the battle aboard the Executor, prowling the galaxy like a shark sniffing for blood. A droid discovered something juicy in the Hoth system, the rebels hiding there. Vader, his dark side powers purring, ordered the fleet to warp there, and fast. But the rebels, cunning scoundrels that they were, had a shield protecting their base. Vader, smelling a trap, figured they knew he was coming. Ground troops it was then. Vader led the charge, breaking through the rebel lines like tissue paper. But the base was a ghost town. The rebels had vanished like phantoms. Vader stomped in, his mechanical boots crunching, and stumbled upon a bunch of rebels hauling their unconscious leader. Before they could raise a blaster, Vader deflected their shots. He carved through them like a hot knife through butter, with the Force as his co-pilot. The last rebel standing, a former Imperial governor, mistook Vader for her rescuer. But Vader only cared about one thing, Luke. When a trooper informed him that the Falcon had been found, Vader shoved the woman aside and stormed off. The rest of the rebels were scattered like wind-blown tumbleweeds, and Vader, fixated on the Falcon, a pesky fly buzzing around his ear. Despite his officer's warnings, he chased it into the Hoth asteroid field, a maze of death rocks. He wanted that ship with all its passengers nice and alive. The asteroids dashed against the Star Destroyers, but Vader didn't flinch. He ordered every ship to comb the field like bounty hunters. The Falcon might be a tiny flea, but Vader wouldn't rest until he squashed it. The hunt was on. Vader was then back at the beck and call of the Emperor. His master sensed a new wrinkle in the Force. Luke Skywalker, Vader's son, and according to the Emperor's paranoid ramblings, a potential galaxy wrecker if he ever learned the Jedi ways. Vader, playing along with the Emperor's dramatics, saw something else, a chance to bend Luke to the dark side, powerful addition to his own arsenal. The Emperor, skeptical as ever, wasn't convinced, but Vader assured him Luke would join the bad guys or become a Force ghost decoration for his collection. Determined to find his son before the Emperor did, Vader called in the big guns, a motley crew of bounty hunters. Boba Fett, the galaxy's most feared gunslinger, was among them, lured by the hefty reward Vader dangled. While briefing the hunters, word came in the Avenger, a Star Destroyer chasing the Falcon, had lost its prey. The commander stammered an apology. Vader accepted the apology with a Force choke, swift, silent, and deadly. A message to all: mess up and you become space dust. With the Falcon vanished and the Emperor breathing down his neck, Vader cranked up the hunt. Luke Skywalker, his own flesh and blood, was out there, a Force-sensitive wildcard in this galactic Game of Thrones. Would he bend his knee to the dark side, or become another enemy to crush? The Falcon slowly limped its way toward Bespin. Boba Fett, the galaxy's best bounty hunter, trailed them like a shark on scent, and worse, he tipped off Vader too. Before the Falcon even landed, Vader, his black armor glinting, descended upon Bespin with a skeleton crew, leaving his Star Destroyers lurking in the shadows. Vader struck a deal with Bespin's big cheese, Lando Calrissian. With his mining operation sweating under the Empire's thumb, Lando agreed to betray his old pal Han Solo if Vader promised to leave him and his people alone. It sounded like a great deal to him. With Fett in tow, Vader hunkered down in Bespin's belly, waiting for the Falcon to fall into his trap. He wasn't interested in the rest of the rebels. Yet Luke, his own flesh and blood, was the prize. Time to turn son into father, Jedi into Sith. The Falcon dropped in, Solo at the helm, but no Luke. His mind like a dark side chessboard. Vader figured he could use Solo as bait. He watched, cloaked in shadows, as Lando double-crossed his friends, turning them over to the stormtroopers. Like a mastermind, Vader threw Solo under the bus, handing him over to Fett as a bounty hunter bonus. Then it was showtime. Drawn by an invisible Force fishing line, Luke arrived, lightsaber humming in defiance. Vader, his mechanical hand itching for a duel, sprung the trap. They clashed, lightsabers carving sparks in the sterile air. Luke fought bravely, but Vader, a seasoned predator, was toying with him. The fight spilled onto a precarious catwalk, metal groaning under their clash. Fueled by anger and fear, Luke landed a lucky blow, slicing Vader's shoulder. Vader, enraged, retaliated, his crimson blade severing Luke's arm, sending it and his lightsaber tumbling into the abyss. Reeling from the pain and loss, Luke was at Vader's mercy. Vader offered Luke a deal: ditch the rebellion, embrace the dark side and become his Sith sidekick. Luke, his face like carved ice, spat back a hard no. Vader, undeterred, dropped a truth bomb bigger than the Death Star. He was Luke's father. Luke's mind fractured in confusion. Sensing his son's vulnerability, Vader spun a web of lies and half-truths. He painted himself as the hero and Kenobi the villain, all leading to this glorious moment where father and son would rule the galaxy, hand in black metal glove. He even begged, his voice cracking in desperation. In his wildest dreams, Vader saw Luke taking his hand, embracing the darkness. But Luke, his spirit ablaze, chose a different path, a leap of faith, a free fall into oblivion, anything but Vader's poisoned destiny. His friends, the scoundrels and droids he called family, snatched him from the abyss just in time. Vader, alone and defeated, retreated to his ship, the Executor. The Falcon sputtered away, just out of reach of his tractor beam. He chased after Luke, sending tendrils of force doubt toward him, whispering of destiny and familial duty. But R2-D2 defied the odds and ignited the Falcon's hyperdrive. The ship, a streak of defiance against the dark, vanished into the stars. Vader, his back to the viewport, wasn't raging. He was sad. A flicker of something human, something long buried under layers of rage and hate stirred within him. The son he never knew, the son he tried to mold into his own dark image, had chosen freedom over darkness. His flesh and blood, Luke Skywalker, was out there, a thorn in his side, a flicker of hope in the galaxy's darkest hour. This game was far from over. The end of Darth Vader's dark regime. Vader, on a leash held by the Emperor, was sent to the Endor system to babysit the construction of the second Death Star. The Emperor himself rolled in weeks later, all might and robes, inspecting the progress. Vader, itching to find Luke, got a speech about being patient, which left him anything but thrilled. Stuck on the Executor, Vader twitched with anticipation when reports buzzed in about the rebel fleet massing near Sullust. A rebel shuttle buzzing around the Endor moon, though, caught his attention like a shiny lure. Sensing Luke on board, Vader waved him in with his dark side daddy issues simmering. Unable to shake the force tingling feeling about his son, Vader scurried back to the Emperor, informing him about the shuttle. The Emperor, a sadistic puppet master, let Luke land on Endor, setting the stage for a family reunion Vader probably wouldn't want to remember. Luke showed up on Endor, lightsaber humming a tune of hope instead of hate. Impressed with his son's force skills and DIY lightsaber project, Vader still gave him the cold shoulder. Luke, pleading with his father, tried to pull Vader back to the light side, but Vader wasn't buying it. He declared that Anakin was dead, sending Luke off to the Emperor. His heart was a black hole of conflicting emotions, but Vader obeyed his master. Acting like the ultimate bad dad, Vader escorted Luke to the Emperor's throne room like a reluctant babysitter. Meanwhile, outside, the rebellion was throwing a space rave around the Death Star, trying to take down the pesky shield. Inside, the Emperor, all creepy smiles and cackles, dangled the dark side in front of Luke. Luke, tempted by the Emperor's continuous goading, lashed out, but Vader stepped in, lightsaber humming like a disapproving parent. They dueled, lightsabers flashing like neon signs, but Vader wasn't aiming for the kill shot. He just wanted to show Luke the dark side's true power. It worked. Fueled by anger and fear, Luke unleashed a force-powered beatdown, kicking Vader down. The Emperor, loving the family drama, egged Luke on, but something clicked in Luke's head. He realized he was turning into the monster he hated and slammed on the brakes. Then, Vader sensed something, a presence in the Force, a twin sister Luke never knew he had. Realizing his weakness, Vader threatened to turn Leia to the dark side instead. That's it. Luke snapped. He went full-on Sith Lord, slicing off Vader's hand and sending him flying. Vader, battered and betrayed, was ready to meet his maker. The Emperor, his temper all fired up, demanded Luke finish the job and become his new right-hand Sith. But Luke, staring at the abyss, saw his own reflection and recoiled. He tossed his lightsaber aside, refusing to play the dark side's game. The Emperor, not cool with this plot twist, unleashed a force lightning storm at Luke, frying him. Luke, writhing in pain, begged Vader for help. Vader, torn between his master and his son, his past and his future, felt a flicker of humanity he thought was long gone. He saw Luke's mercy, his unwavering belief that there was good in him. At that moment, Vader made a choice. He grabbed the Emperor, love and defiance crackling around him, and chucked him down the reactor shaft. The Sith Lord was no more. Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight, was back. The prodigal warrior had returned, bringing balance to the Force and proving that even the darkest hearts can find redemption. Luke carried his father to the Imperial shuttle. Anakin rasped for Luke to remove his mask. Father and son truly saw each other for the first time. No Jedi, no Sith, just two souls bound by blood and sacrifice. And Anakin smiled, a flicker of the man beneath the Vader mask breaking through, a smile only Padme ever witnessed. As Kenobi and Yoda, like phantoms of the past, materialized behind Luke, Anakin whispered that Luke had saved him. Then, with a final fading smile, Anakin Skywalker, redeemed and free, closed his eyes for the last time. He tried to reach out to Padme to tell her their son had brought him back and utter 1,000 apologies, but his voice dissolved into to the Force. He died in Luke's arms, the chaos of the collapsing Death Star a distant hum around him. Imperial troopers milled around, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding before them, but Anakin's spirit lived on. Kenobi and Yoda, wise old mentors from beyond the veil, shepherded his soul to the cosmic river, ensuring his place in the Force. Luke cradled his father's body and fled the exploding Death Star in the Imperial shuttle. Back on Endor, he built a pyre, flames mirroring the inferno engulfing the space station. He cremated Anakin alone. The burning mask, the symbol of a dark past, held no joy for anyone but Luke. His destiny was fulfilled, his son saved. Anakin Skywalker joined his old masters, a hero once more, his tale a legend in the hearts of those who truly knew him. The galaxy celebrated the fall of the Empire, unaware of the quiet redemption that flickered like a distant star, a testament to the power of love, even in the darkest corners of the universe. The Force hummed with newfound balance, and Luke Skywalker, carrying the legacy of his father, gazed into the starlit sky, knowing that Anakin Skywalker, the fallen Jedi, would forever be a part of him. Anakin's soul lives on. So, picture this. Luke's back with his pals and his sister, feeling all triumphant after defeating the Emperor. And then, out of nowhere, Anakin Skywalker himself shows up, along with Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, all chill and at peace. They're all smiling at Luke like proud parents, happy to see that the Jedi are back in business. Skywalker, being the concerned dad he is, asks Yoda and Kenobi if Luke's going to be okay. And Kenobi, in his wise old way, basically comforts him, saying that he's done alright so far. From then on, Anakin, Obi-Wan and Yoda stick around in spirit form, helping Luke out whenever he needs it. It's like a family reunion, Jedi style. 9 years after the rebellion's victory, Luke Skywalker was busy building his Jedi Academy, trying to keep the galaxy on the straight and narrow. Meanwhile, Ahsoka Tano was on a different mission, hunting down a mythical compass she hoped would prevent another galactic war and the Empire's return. Let's just say her quest took a weird turn. She found herself knocked out cold after a duel, only to wake up in the world between worlds, a freaky limbo where time and space were just suggestions. And who did she find waiting for her, looking all smug and Force ghosty? None other than Anakin Skywalker, the man, the myth, the fallen Jedi turned hero. Talk about a surprise party. Ahsoka nearly choked on her shock. Anakin, not one for small talk, just smirked and said he wasn't expecting to see her so soon. It turns out that the Force worked in mysterious ways, even for ghostly Jedi dads. Still reeling from the whole scenario, Ahsoka stammered out his name like a broken record. Ever the charmer, Anakin pointed out she'd aged a bit, which earned him a chuckle and a shrug from his former apprentice. But the chit-chat was over soon enough. Anakin, all serious now, reminded Ahsoka she'd lost her fight and declared himself her new trainer. Ahsoka, feeling like she was stuck in a bad melodrama, protested that she was way too old for Jedi school. Anakin just laughed, like the smug ghost that he was, and said it's never too late to learn. So, how did Anakin decide to impart his wisdom? By trying to murder Ahsoka, of course. Lightsaber ignited, he attacked, declaring it was time for her to live or die. Ahsoka, not one to play dead, even for her ghost sensei, ignited her own saber and held her own. As they dueled, swords flashing like neon signs, Ahsoka snarked that maybe her old master was all talk and no lightsaber. Anakin, still smirking, admitted he hadn't taught her everything. Then, with a flourish that made a Sith Lord jealous, he sliced the platform under Ahsoka, sending her plummeting into the abyss. Talk about tough love, right? Ahsoka then woke up younger, the world around her blurred with fog. Clone troopers in their old school armor rushed by, and there stood Anakin, looking like the day they first met, cocky grin and all. It turns out they were reliving one of Ahsoka's first missions back in the thick of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka couldn't wrap her head around why they were back in boot camp. Anakin, ever the cryptic mentor, just said their problem was her confusion. Then, with a wink and a swagger, he charged into battle, leaving Ahsoka scrambling after him, desperate for answers. They met again amidst the laser fire, Anakin warning her about incoming droids. Ahsoka, lost in the memories of past losses, couldn't shake the guilt of all the lives lost under her command. Anakin's wise words echoing from beyond the grave reminded her that war was hell and leading meant sacrifice. He confessed that even a Jedi Master like him carried the weight of every fallen soldier under him. He explained how he, raised as a peacekeeper, had to mold himself into a wartime general, training his Padawan to fight despite their peaceful beginnings. Ahsoka, thinking ahead, worried if fighting was all she'd teach her own students one day. Anakin, blunt as ever, stated it was the only way to survive this mess. Ahsoka, weary of the endless conflict, thought about throwing in the towel, to which Anakin simply replied that she would then die. As Anakin charged back into the fray, his form flickered between his Jedi self and the dark specter of Darth Vader. This wasn't just a trip down memory lane, it was a glimpse into the Jedi's burden, the darkness that always lurked at the edge of the path. Next, Ahsoka was in the thick of the siege of Mandalore, Mandalore, a fight she hadn't even shared with Anakin. When he finally showed up, looking clueless about this particular war zone, Ahsoka filled him in. Anakin, ever the proud mentor, beamed about how she was a real badass on Mandalore, but Ahsoka wasn't having it. All she saw was a legacy of death and destruction, both hers and Anakin's. She reminded him of how powerful he was, so powerful he turned to the dark side and became Darth Vader, the galaxy's biggest baddie. Anakin, not cool with this guilt trip, said she hadn't learned a thing. Remember that choice to live or die back in the world between worlds? Yeah. He threw that back at her, ignited his lightsaber, and attacked. They dueled like crazy, Anakin pushing her to the edge of the abyss. He was a whirlwind of rage, his form flickering between Jedi Anakin and Sith Vader like a malfunctioning light bulb. Battered and bruised, Ahsoka finally disarmed him, lightsaber hovering over his neck. But instead of the kill shot, she chucked the weapon into the void. She chose life, like a true Jedi. Anakin, surprised but proud, threw a genuine smile her way. There was hope for her yet, his ghost whispered. Then poof, he was gone. Shaken but resolute, Ahsoka felt ready for whatever the hell was coming next. This Force Ghost boot camp, wild as it was, did its job. She learned, she fought, she chose. Stuck in the wilds of a far-flung galaxy, Ahsoka felt lost again. Exile on a backwater planet wasn't exactly the grand Jedi adventure she'd signed up for, but as she gazed at the unfamiliar stars, a flicker of warmth, a familiar presence in the Force, washed over her. There, standing like a ghost against the cosmic backdrop, was Anakin. Not Darth Vader, that twisted shell of a fallen master. This was Anakin, the man, the mentor, the friend. Just his presence, like a silent approval from beyond the grave, was all Ahsoka needed. She didn't need another lecture, another lightsaber duel in some Force-powered limbo. Anakin's silent presence was proof that she was on the right path, even if it wasn't some glorious crusade. Vader's legacy remains unmatched. The news crackled across the galaxy like blaster fire through Endor's forests. The Emperor and Vader were now gone. The rebellion, now the big cheese in town, blasted their victory message into every corner of the cosmos. With the big bads gone and the Empire's top brass scattered like stormtroopers in a blaster fight, the whole thing imploded faster than anyone could have ever imagined. But things weren't so clean-cut. Rumors clung to Vader and the Emperor's fate in some corners. The Imperial remnants kept the truth under wraps, whispering Vader and Palpatine were just gathering their strength in the Outer Rim. Of course, those in the know weren't fooled. Once hidden in the shadows, Vader's helmet became a symbol. Some hated it, some worshipped it. Graffiti crew stenciled it on walls, muttering how Vader lived like a twisted prayer. The man himself, once a secret monster in the Emperor's closet, had become a galactic legend, as notorious as he was feared. By the time he died, Vader was the galaxy's most hated villain, his name synonymous with the dark side and the iron fist of the Empire. Even stormtroopers, those faceless goons, got off easier in the history books. And even decades later, Vader's shadow still loomed under the New Republic's shiny boots. He was a reminder of the darkness, a cautionary tale whispered around flickering campfires. Sure, the Empire was gone, but Darth Vader, the fallen Jedi, the terror in black armor, remained a stain on the galaxy's conscience. His legacy, a twisted monument to fear and power, refused to fade into the void. So, even in death, Vader was hard to shake. He was a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the Force, a reminder that even the darkest hearts can leave a mark long after they're gone. And for some, that echo was a warning, a chilling reminder that the dark side never truly dies. It just waits, patient and silent, for its next chance to rise. Later, in the future, when Leia, drained to the bone, reached out to her son Ben, a wave of love and support washed over her. It was like a cosmic family reunion, with voices and faces from across the Skywalker saga swirling around her. And there, amidst the chorus, was Anakin, the man who'd caused her so much pain, the ghost who haunted their family tree. Leia finally let go of the anger, the hurt, the years of unspoken betrayal. She heard his apology, the echo of regret that had followed him beyond the grave, and in that moment, she forgave him. The love she'd always held for her brother, buried beneath layers of grief and disappointment, bloomed again. It was a bittersweet acceptance, a peace offering across the cosmic expanse. That same love, the same redemption, resonated across the Force. When Rey faced off against a resurrected Darth Sidious, Anakin's voice joined the chorus of Jedi legends, lending her strength. His sacrifice, his choice to fight the darkness within, echoed through the Force, tipping the scales once more. With Anakin's eternal power backing her, Rey struck down the Emperor, ensuring the balance he'd fought for wouldn't crumble. Kylo Ren, back to his Ben Solo self, followed in his grandfather's footsteps one last time. He gave up his life for Rey, a final act of redemption that mirrored Anakin's sacrifice on the Death Star. The Skywalker bloodline may have ended with Ben, but Rey knew their legacy lived on. She took their name, Skywalker, a mantle she wore with pride, a symbol of hope and balance. And somewhere in the celestial afterglow, Anakin Skywalker watched his family reunited. Leia, his daughter, was finally at peace. Ben, his grandson, redeemed. And Rey, carrying the Skywalker torch, a testament to the light that even the darkest past couldn't extinguish. The ghosts of Skywalker had found their haven, their balance, and their family was together at last. Marvelous verdict. So, there you have it, Anakin Skywalker. Jedi hero turned Sith Lord and redeemed soul. The galaxy's most complex villain got the full, deep dive. From pod racing on Tatooine to choking fools on the Death Star, we've chased Vader through love, loss, and enough lightsaber fights to fill an entire trophy room. Did he deserve redemption? Did he earn it? It's up to you to make that choice. But one thing is certain, the story of Vader goes beyond just a warning about the dark side. It's a reminder that a small spark of light can stay lit in the most shadowy stretches of space, even inside a Jedi who has lost his way. And at times, this tiny spark is enough to change everything, to create harmony in the Force, and for someone to be remembered among the stars. Ultimately, it was not Darth Vader who caused fear, but Anakin Skywalker who returned as a hero. So, the next time you see that famous helmet, remember the person behind it, the child who once had dreams about reaching the stars, and the hero who managed to return from a place of darkness. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
We would be honored